in your screen?
You are. You're in my
space.
space.
Screen. Hi, everyone. Hello.
Hi.
You have chosen the cool option, I feel like, for the afternoon to be in here. So, well, I'll introduce myself real quick. My name's Steph Feehill. I have worn a number of hats. You might know about one that came with the title Once Upon a Time and may yet again someday. For today, I am here with my Citizens Project hat on. Citizens Project is a civic engagement nonprofit. We do a lot of voter education and local government accountability. We have been around since 1992. For those who remember a little bit of local history, that's around the time that a lot of the, can everyone hear me in the back, by the way? Am I good? Okay, cool. Make sure that we're projecting up here. It was around the time that a lot of like the parachurch organizations and right-wing groups started to move into El Paso County and really push like an anti-gay agenda, which led to Colorado being labeled the hate state, and we remember Amendment 2 and all of that. Citizens Project rose up around the same time to push back against that, defend the queer community, support separation of church and state, make sure that voters have access to like real relevant knowledge about who's running for office, who's going to be on their ballot, what they're actually doing once they get elected, and have like a real opportunity to hold them accountable, which is really important for our democracy. It's one thing to be able to vote, it's another to have a meaningful, informed choice and the ability to keep tabs on those folks. So, before I dig into everything that is on my list, I prepared an outline for what I wanted to talk about today. And honestly, I'm personally feeling extremely shook right now by what just happened in Minnesota. I know we've got littles present, I don't want to like traumatize anyone, but if you don't know, the recent Speaker of the Minnesota House and her husband were assassinated in their homes, and another state senator was shot and injured. And I just kind of want to preface everything I'm saying with like just how much of a struggle for survival this has been for the queer community. Obviously, a lot of you folks in this room know. Some of you may be here to be supportive allies of your friends and family and neighbors, which is great. Welcome. We embrace you. And I think for everyone else, it's just sort of been like, well, yeah, you know, if you challenge the authority structure of our country, people tend to not like that. There's going to be somebody who's mad about it. And one of the most frequent causes of political violence in this country usually comes down to people who like do some combination of race class narrative or who like challenge heteronormativity. It is one of the biggest risks in our country in terms of political violence. And so being in this room, being at this festival, learning about how to empower yourself and protect your neighbors is such an important step because we really need it. There are a lot of threats on people's lives just because of who they are. And I feel like if you're in this room, you probably know that's not okay. So, I kind of just want to give a little bit of an overview. You all know we've got like multiple levels of government in this country, right? So you've got your federal government, there's some stuff only they can do. You've got your local governments, there's a lot of like local affairs type things that they do, land use and usually pretty dry stuff, to be honest. And something that I think a lot of people don't realize is just how much of the lawmaking in this country is done in our state houses. It's actually the majority of it. The way we get most things done in this country is for state legislatures to do it first and to do it alone frequently. So in Colorado, we really stand apart amongst a lot of states, including other states that are generally considered like left-leaning or progressive or democratic. We have some of the most robust protections for LGBTQ folks and their families in the country. Really aggressive legal shields, really meticulous protections for like insurance coverage and documentation and rights for trans kids, which is really important because right now we're going through a big shift in our country between like, is the federal government going to overrule something or the state's going to get to do it? And you'll notice that a lot of people who say they're all about states' rights would love to overrule states who they don't agree with. And so we're kind of caught in the middle of that right now with folks wanting to come here, and we welcome them to come here so that they can be safe, so that their kids can have care, so that their marriage remains valid, even if Obergefell is overturned. And so just for a little bit of context here, 26 states currently have a ban on gender-affirming care for anyone under 18, and that's all care, right? That's not like, you all know probably if you're in this room, you know that there's this mythology about about trans kids getting irreversible surgeries. That doesn't happen. They're basically just banning care that helps trans kids like stay alive, be healthy, and live to see adulthood and be well. And at 26 states, that means that 40% of transgender youth currently live under a gender affirming care ban. So that's, right, like, that's like more than a third of transgender kids in this country live in a state that doesn't recognize them. 18 states have passed some sort of bathroom restriction, and 23 states have a sports restriction that limits people's ability to participate in sports. And if we start to get into like book bans and removal of books and removal of library materials, we quickly find out that like race, ethnicity, and LGBTQ status are like top targets for why those books are removed. So in Colorado, we have been doing things very differently. Since about 2019, we've been passing a lot of laws that protect the community. I'm just going to kind of run through them so you have like a sense in case people ever ask you like, what difference does it make, right? Like we're living in Trump's America. I'm screwed no matter where I go. Like it's not true. We have a lot of guardrails up. We have a lot of ways that we can protect each other. Going back to like conversion therapy ban that we passed in 2019, marriage equality. We've removed the junk language out of our Constitution and statute to protect marriage equality. And then we had a whole package. There was a whole package of protected health care and LGBTQ protections that were passed in 2023. Really, really detailed. So this includes like if other states ban same-sex marriage or ban gender affirming care, and they have, or prohibit you from having your insurance cover your health care if you're trans. If you come to this state to seek care, Colorado law prohibits anyone from turning your information over to another state so that they can use it against you. This is a really robust protection. It's one thing to say you can come to Colorado and get care for your kiddo that isn't legal in Oklahoma or that isn't legal in Wyoming. But it's a very different thing to say you can come to Colorado for that care, and if some fascist wannabe in another state or at the federal level wants to dip into your information here in Colorado, it is legally prohibited for them to turn it over. That doesn't mean nobody is ever going to break the law, but it's really important as long as we have the tools to work with that we're using all of them to keep people safe. We make it explicit in law now what counts as gender affirming care so that it's clear that we're, if you say, I need gender affirming care, I'm going to a behavioral health specialist, that's something that you can ask for and that has to be covered. And this is really important when it comes to things like, if you have, if a hospital or a clinic has a mandatory disclosure, which is also in the law, thanks to Colorado, that if, for instance, like they don't provide gender affirming care, or they don't provide abortion care, or, they provide counseling services, but they would have to refer you for surgery service. That they have all of that detailed so that you know what you're getting into when you go in for care. That's all codified in law now as well. We've done some name change and documentation work. Some of you probably know that in Colorado it is now required by law that if a kid goes to a public school and says, hey, I go by a different name because of my gender identity, the school is obligated to address that kiddo by their chosen name. Anybody have kids in school right now in a public school?
I don't, but I work in a public school.
You don't, but you work in a public school. Are you in D11 or 20 or 49?
20.
Yeah, okay. There's a whole thing going on with this right now, right? So we're kind of playing a legal battle. The state has said you have to call a kid by their chosen name. That's a matter of basic civil rights. And you can't, this law was strengthened this year under the Kelly-Loving Act. Also says that you can't have a process for honoring that right that treats trans kids differently than other kids. So, if Robert can come in and say, I go by Bobby, and if, Michelle can come in and say, I go by Shelly, then they have to honor that. If you have a kid who says like, oh, well, actually I go by a different name for gender affirming reasons, they can't have a separate process by which they determine whether or not they're going to honor that. Which, there've been a lot of attacks in this community that this is an assault on parental rights. I'll just say, for someone who is on the other, on the inside when these things are going on, this bill was meticulously crafted to protect parental rights. Because before this was passed into law, it was perfectly legal for a school to say, I don't care what you call yourself, I don't care how you identify, and I don't care what your parents support you in your identity, I will only be calling you what's on your birth certificate. And that is not fair to families who are affirming and accepting of their transgender kid. So I think if we're going to talk about parental rights, it's got to be everybody's parental rights, right? Not just people we're picking and choosing. And then some of you may have heard this year we passed an even stronger set of protections for transgender folks. Some things had to get taken out of it. But one of the things that it does is it codifies in law that intentionally dead naming and misgendering someone, and not like, oh, I made a mistake, I forgot that you changed your name, I'll fix it. But like intentionally refusing to address someone the way they want to be addressed is considered harassment, it's discriminatory, and it means that the Colorado Civil Rights Commission is able to take action based on that, which is a pretty big deal for folks who have been harassed, dead named, misgendered, mistreated in places of public accommodation in ways that we know are no longer acceptable for other protected classes. It now covers gender identity, which is really important for us to have. If you don't have an enforcement mechanism, the law is kind of just a suggestion. So, something I do want to touch on that I think sometimes in Colorado we forget, because we've had a pretty good track record the last handful of years for this community with making a lot of change. As I said, I talked us up, right? We're making a lot of really great policy changes that are unique in the country or that lead the country. And also, like, it's not a fact of nature that happens. It's not a coincidence. It happens because people very intentionally seek candidates for public office and vet candidates for public office who will take a stand on these issues and not be afraid, and not shy away when it gets difficult or shy away when people get threatening. And that's why we get results like this. So it's really important every election that you vote in, which hopefully is every election where you are an eligible voter, that you get to know who's on your ballot and make sure that they share our values, that they love all families, that they value all families, that they want to protect all children, especially the most vulnerable kids, and that they're not just like running on political talking points from any party about how they're going to, sort of, a lot of them will kind of do this thing like, oh yeah, I support all kids. Okay, well how about trans kids? Because if they won't say it, right? They're like, oh yeah, I support freedom for everybody. You're like, oh okay, well like 5 years ago you said it was an abomination to be gay. Do you still think that, right? And so one of the reasons why Citizens Project is so valuable and why it's so important for us to keep on with our work is because all of those like local races, like the school boards and the city council and that sort of thing, a lot of people don't know how well you could get to know those candidates, right? They're local, so that means they live in your neighborhood, in your community, they're nearby. You should be able to send them an email and get an actual direct personal response. You should be able to ask them any question about how they're going to act when they're in office, and they should be able to give you an answer. But that hasn't always been the case, and the traditional media landscape doesn't tend to cover races like that. It tends to talk about federal stuff and big stuff, flashy issues. And they don't tend to pay attention to school board and state legislature and county and city. And so one of those places where Citizens Project steps up is that we put out a voter guide every year. We ask those candidates, where do you stand on these issues, right? We support LGBTQ rights at Citizens Project. How will you represent that community? How will you ensure safety for those folks? How will you be inclusive and embrace justice and diversity in your work? How will you make yourself accessible to your constituents? Things that maybe everyone else isn't asking, so that you can access that information about your candidates who are running to represent you and make sure that they actually earn your vote and that they actually serve you once they're elected. So I'm always going to encourage people to think more about the smaller races, because those smaller races are actually where your vote has the most weight. A few people voting or not voting in a presidential election generally is not going to sway it, right? But when it comes to something like city council or school board or a state legislative race, a few votes can make or break the entire thing. And so it's really important that you vote all the way down your ballot and that you really pay attention to those local races.
Got a question in the back, Scott.
Yeah, and I can actually stop right there and wrap up and move to questions, but that's what I'm always going to encourage people is to like embolden yourself, like talk to those folks, they have to answer to you. So, yeah.
So regarding the voter guide you were mentioning,
yeah,
I think it's pretty obvious that people even sitting in front of Congress would blatantly lie about what their intentions are.
Sure.
So how do you get past that?
That's a really good question. So here, and this is something we're actually working on a lot. I'm glad you flagged it, because so right now with our programming, right, we do a voter guide for all elections, but we only do a report on like actual elected official behavior for the state legislature. So for the state legislature, right, we can show like, hey, we asked you about these things and you said you were supportive of this community and yet you voted no on all of our priority bills for LGBTQ rights. Like, it's on the record that way then, right? We don't so much have that for things like school board and city council because the legislature has like a really accessible website. It's time bound, right? They have a 120-day session. So once it's done, we put out a report. It's kind of harder with like basically with governing bodies that meet year round and that kind of have like more sporadic action. That's harder to track, like what votes are we going to count as a priority as opposed to, right? So that is something we're actually working on in our program so that we have a better like closed loop of accountability, right? We ask you about these things, you get elected, did you do them? And so that's the way that we unearth that. I will say too, like at the end of the day also, you know, it's people can lie if we let them, right? It ultimately is up to everyday folks to decide that self-governance is something we value enough that we're going to take responsibility for who we put in office and whether or not they're responsive to us, right? So, there was another hand up. Or maybe you just stretched it. Yeah?
At the local level, Colorado Springs, and I'm sure other communities have, is a problem of essentially churches violating.
Mm-hmm.
And they tell their they may not quite say it, but they're telling their congregations how to vote. And that's what's hurting D20, that's what's hurting, among other things, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I suspect that's the biggest problem we have in D20 is churches telling their congregations how to vote.
Yeah.
And is there a path? I know it's not in your job description.
Yeah.
Are you aware because of your connections in this world?
Oh, we're aware.
How
We're aware.
things that can be done perhaps to defeat that, or
Yeah.
I mean, this administration is going to prosecute for break-in. Is it the Logan Amendment? Is it my remember? Right?
It's Johnson. I think
Johnson.
yes. So I don't know if all this, I don't know if all this is coming through the audio, so I'm going to just repeat the question. He asked about violations of separation of church and state. Basically, the churches are more or less, if not directly, advising their congregation how to vote, which what it should do is it should jeopardize their C3 status. That's what it's supposed to do, right?
The IRS should come after.
The IRS should come after them. I will say like C3s like Citizens Project or like League of Women Voters, whatever, we follow this stuff to a T. We're very careful to not be out here like advocating that you vote a certain way, that you vote a certain party, that you vote for a certain candidate. We are here to inform and let you know like where people stand on various issues. But churches, obviously a lot of churches are going a much stronger route on that. I think the challenge is that those laws are federal, right? So I think there are some things that could potentially be done at a state level. I think there are some things that could potentially be done at a state level. But I think like the biggest lever of power that you're looking for like real accountability would be to challenge their C3 status, right? Like you are not supposed to be collecting money tax-free and operating as a not-for-profit, which they have great latitude for how they spend their money, especially religious organizations. And that comes with some responsibilities, like don't politicize from the pulpit. So I think that's the kind of thing that like people can certainly make a complaint to the IRS. There are forms. I will invite you to look them up. Actually, you might know the form off the top of your head. Do you know it? Okay, I don't remember the number.
The problem is I'd have to go sit in a church and actually catch them doing it.
Well,
That's something I haven't.
theoretically, that's true.
They won't do it from the dais.
That's true.
That's the thing,
Yeah,
they will not do it
yeah.
from the dais.
Yeah,
They will
yeah,
do it on the
yeah.
Wednesday night supper.
Yeah, Wednesday supper, yeah.
That's right. So they're not
So I
doing
don't
it.
have enough intel to file a complaint.
Well, the problem is they never do it from
Yeah.
the dais. I have never seen them do it from the dais.
I will
They
say,
will
I
step off
I
the
do
dais
know of
and then
a
come down.
state elected official here in El Paso County who ran for office from his pulpit, where he is a current pastor. And that's pretty blatant. And they stream, and not televised, but they live stream their services. And there's lots of video content. And that to me is just like, I think somebody just needs to decide that it's worth taking up
But,
the case.
well, the IRS would actually have to.
And the IRS would have to actually care, that is true.
I guess the question then becomes, you mentioned the state.
Mhm. So there are some ways, and this is less about directly with churches, And then I'll just say this is kind of like a policy brainstorm, not something like Citizens Project isn't monitoring a bill or promoting a bill of this kind. But there are some ways that certainly we can crack down on the misuse of public grant funds that go to nonprofit organizations that are not supposed to be using it for proselytizing purposes, right? So that can get kind of tricky, but like certainly like if a church has a nonprofit that's associated with them that provides certain services to the public, like homelessness services or after school services or something like that, if they're collecting grant money and then using it to proselytize, then they are violating that, right? And it's kind of a squishy area, and I've kind of heard some people talk about ways that could be tidied up so that it's not abused so easily. But I think, again, like there are just some things that the federal government kind of needs to do. We need them to come around for us, and states can lead, but eventually that lever of like the tax enforcement is the big one.
State collects taxes as well.
State does collect taxes, but you get your
federal.
right.
But could the state take away their state tax from the state?
You get your exemption status through the IRS, though. That's where you file it
So we need
as a
to do law in
nonprofit.
Colorado that adds power to the state level.
It could be. We'd still have to overrule. You'd still have to overrule the Fed, though. The Fed prevails. So yeah, I know.
States' rights.
You'd think people believe in that, but
Also, more people need to turn them in. That's the other
Yes.
thing. Not a
Yeah.
lot of people like to put their name on that form.
right.
They just don't. It's
Yeah.
hard to stand up. Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a hard thing. It really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Cool. Anything more?
Questions? Anybody else? No?
It's only 1:06. Yeah.
Do you feel, maybe this is going too far back, but just with the last presidential election, that supporters in the overall, community were properly mobilized and like knew what was at stake? I just felt like, and obviously there were so many reasons about why, because things came together so
Sure.
last minute, but it just
Sure.
felt like, I just felt like people didn't understand what was at stake.
Yeah, I mean, I do think we all have a pretty short memory a lot of times, especially in regards to just, political news and what's going on in governments, right? Like a 24-hour news cycle, there's always something new happening. I've been thinking a lot this week about how, like, during COVID, which was like 5 years ago, there was this whole movement of people. They were just like 1,000 Americans are dying a day of a novel airborne illness. And they were just like, I'd rather people die than have me wear a mask because you can't tell me what to do. And now we're hearing this like, well, in the name of public safety, we have to send in the National Guard and crush this protest. It's like, wow, how did we go from that to that? Like, did everyone just forget? So I think sometimes it's just having a short memory. But I think also, like, there's been, for the last, let's see, I'm gonna age myself a little bit. Certainly for all of my lifetime, there has been a big push by folks from the far right to really dominate in local government. And I mean, really, like, there are, for every elected official who is on Capitol Hill in DC, I'm trying to think what the ratio is, but it's like hundreds to one, right? The vast majority of elected officials in this country are not in DC. They're in your community or at least in your state, right? And for like something like 60% of races just a handful of years ago, they weren't even contested. They weren't even contested, and the person who was running was a conservative or Republican or someone adjacent to that. And so we actually have barely even begun to like have competitive elections for most races. And I think that actually has a lot to do with it, because you think about, frequently people will serve in like city council or school board, and then the next thing that they run for is the state ledge, and then the next thing that they run for is a statewide office, or they go to Congress, or, right, that's how most people end up in some of those like bigger, so-called bigger offices. So if that pipeline isn't being filled with new leadership, then who ends up in control at the top as well, right? It's whoever was at that entry level to begin with. So if we don't have people showing up to run for offices who care about our values in this community, then that pipeline will not be full. So, I mean, here we are in this room, let's see how many people in this room. There's gotta be at least one person around this table, because we have almost about a dozen people in here. I bet one of you could run for public office and win and be really good at it. You could, right? I mean, if you go to some of these meetings, you sit in school board, or you sit in city council, or watch the legislature for a little bit, you will quickly find out those people are not better than you. They're not smarter than you. They don't know more than you. They're not that serious. Like, most of these are pretty basic, which is fine. Ordinary people should run for and hold public office, but like, if they can, you can.
And you can. And you can.
And I can.
Do it.
When I don't have my Citizens Project hat on, yes, correct. What's up?
So to interject a little bit of humor into that.
Sorry?
So to interject a little bit of humor into that is that a friend of mine, she's saying that if Warren Boebert could do it,
Right.
anyone can do it.
Right. I mean, this is the experiment of self-government. It comes with hazards. It's not, you're right, it's not a perfect system, but it is, I think, a hell of a lot better than living under someone else's boot. I think it is a lot better than living under an authority figure who decides everything for you. But you know, that right, like the right to self-government, the right to representation, it comes with responsibilities, because rights always come with responsibilities. So, you know, every so often, when I'm doing like this work or in my other life, I'll encounter someone who's just like, can't we just like get rid of all of them and just get all new people? And I'll say, you know what, that's really not a bad idea. What are you gonna run for? Right? Because if we're gonna clear out all of the boardrooms and we're gonna clear out all of the legislative chambers and get all new people, I'm like, dude, we have an opportunity to get all new people at least every other year. And actually in Colorado Springs, the off year, this odd year, has 2 elections. This year it has 3, doesn't it, Shelley? This year it has 3, because we had city council in the spring, and we have a special election that's coming up on Tuesday. Ballots are already out. And then we've got school board again in the fall. So that's like 2 minimum of 2 elections in an odd year. That's a lot of opportunities to put in all new people. Let's do it. What did you have?
I was just gonna ask, is that, because I've only lived here for less than a year, and I've
Okay.
already had 3 elections, and I'm getting fatigued,
Yeah.
so.
Dude, that's so real. Voter fatigue is so real. Having a special election in the middle of the summer, not typical, no. But we do kind of have an odd sort of schedule where, like most other cities in Colorado, will do their municipal election in the fall of the odd year, along with, like, they call it the coordinated election. It's when you do school board, and sometimes there are like special elections, like because of a vacancy or something. They'll push all of those into November in that odd year. Colorado Springs has decided we gotta be special, and so we do ours in the spring of the odd year. Colorado Citizens Project is actually the named plaintiff in a lawsuit against the city of Colorado Springs. We are joined with the League of Women Voters, actually, and Colorado Latinos Vote, specifically because we find that schedule excludes a lot of people. They get voter fatigue, right, like you mentioned, or they don't know that it's coming up, or they're like, I just moved here from Fort Collins or from Denver, Republic. Like, why do y'all have yet another election? Like, I don't even know where to start with this, right? And we end up having like a city council and sometimes even a mayor who are decided by like 26% of the electorate. Was that about the figure, Shelley? Do you usually have it? Oh, it's 24% this year. Yeah.
And that's, again, that's no mayoral balance, that's typically.
Yeah, for a-
lower. If you're, because
right.
you're a strong mayor city, your mayor's election will have more voter turnout.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, this is a real hazard about having so many elections. And by the way, just in case anyone, you ever kind of need to like get in a bar fight with somebody, but not a bar fight, an argument with somebody about this. It costs the city a lot more money too. We could save a lot of money on that election by like getting on a ballot that's already going to be printed and letting the El Paso County clerk and recorder handle it for us, because they're very good at this. Instead of having it be a whole other project that the city clerk has to absorb and has to front the postage and the printing and the processing and all of that. Unfortunately, I have heard some people say the quiet part out loud with this, and they're like, well, maybe we don't want to move the election to a time where too many people are going to vote. Just like maybe we don't want to have a city council that pays so that working people can be on it, because, do we really want those people in office? So you got to challenge those folks, right? If we want better representation, anybody should be able to step up, right? So. I can't quite hear you. I'm really sorry.
So that there definitely would benefit by taking away all of the ethnocentric biases and focusing solely on human rights,
Yeah.
like as a whole, rather than.
The which kind of biases? I'm sorry, I didn't quite.
I was saying it would be nice if they would take away the ethnocentric bias, which is just like any kind of bias in general,
Yeah.
Because, like, when I look at, the problems that we have going on, it's mostly environmental or health. So we need to be focused on people's needs rather than people's opinions, and that's where I get a little frustrated, a little biased.
I guess who's biased though? Maybe I'm not understanding the.
A lot of political bias, mostly, like, I come from Montgomery, Alabama.
Okay.
And there's a lot of hate down there.
Yeah.
If you're not in the box with all the other people in the box, and you're outside the box, then you're put up against a wall. I would like to see less of that.
Gotcha.
More focus on people's health and their
Yeah.
personal values, their core, and their essentials for growth.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can get behind that. I actually, one of the, part of our focus at Citizens Project, and so part of where we get a lot of our grant funding right now is through the Colorado Health Foundation, specifically because health equity is such a major issue in some of the communities that we are most concerned about. So in Southeast Colorado Springs, we have a very low voter turnout, right? It is also like a minority-majority community, right? It is just by proportion and like more black and brown than the rest of Colorado Springs. And it's kind of fascinating, but in a very disturbing way, how much like that trend tracks with other poor life outcomes, right? It is 6 degrees hotter on average in Southeast Colorado Springs relative to the rest of town. The life expectancy is lower. Seriously, the rate of pedestrian deaths is higher, right? Like the single most deadly intersection where people outside of cars get hit and killed in Colorado Springs is Astros on an Academy. They're just like all of these things where it's like, Astros on an Academy, it's right across from Deerfield Hills. And I remember when I first saw that and saw that how many deaths happened there, I was like, that actually makes perfect sense because there's a lot of housing on the east side of Academy. And then if you want to like get on the bus and go down to the college, because the college campus is down the way there, you have to get on a bus on the other side of Academy. And we have like an 8-lane urban highway basically in the middle of our city. If you're rushing to catch that bus, because we don't run enough of them, sometimes you have to book it. And I'm like, I can imagine that that's how a lot of people end up getting hit by cars, or because they don't look for people, right? Like they're just all of these kinds of compounding factors where like when you think about communities that have historically been marginalized and excluded, sometimes like explicitly and lately more implicitly, you end up with poor health outcomes. You end up with more illness, you end up with more accidents. And that ties directly into whether or not people have access to the ballot, that they're empowered to vote, that they have the knowledge they need to vote. Because I think, genuinely, I really do think if we get better representation for communities that are being left behind, the people who you put in office who care about that a lot, they will go to bat for those folks. They will get them what they need. We have seen city councilors do it, who rise to the occasion and step up and fight for funding to come to their underfunded community. And it works. Because it's democracy, and democracy works when we actually do it. So, yeah.
Any other questions for staff? Any more?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's on topic, and I'm totally,
Yeah, whatever, man, we're done. We're like, we got only a couple
supposed
minutes.
to probably say anything. But right now it feels like the other side, they're focused on just making people lose. Whereas we want everyone to win, but they don't want to see everyone win. So to me, I feel like, how do we convince those that want to shoot themselves in the foot, or themselves just period, to get at the other person? It's this negative, it's not fueled by any type of policy, other than the border, which is still just hate. It's all, we can do it the right way. There are correct ways to do it, and I feel like at the top level, they do the same thing. So like you said, they're not the brightest, even in the House of Representatives, they're pretty stupid people there. I'm just gonna say they're pretty stupid people. So it's hard to
They're basic, for sure.
It's hard to see that their fight that they've had so long at the state level, us actually doing something about it, and convincing those people that you don't want to see other people lose, you want to see everyone win. Because when the least of us come up, everyone comes up. And you can't, it's so easy to see it on our side. but you can't convince them.
You're
So
speaking
that's
facts, my
not
friend.
Sorry.
You know, you're speaking facts. I think so. I'm trying to remember who the it was like a reporter, I think. I cannot remember his name now, but the line was basically that you know, no one champions the creed of this country more than those who have been denied its promise, right? And I think, like, you know, there's always I think there's always this tendency that kind of comes back on folks like ourselves that we must not love this country, right? Like, oh, you're just complaining about it. Go ahead, go live in some, like, you know, hellscape country, whatever, which is kind of ridiculous, right? Like, most of the world elects their leaders. But I think people kind of have this thing in their head that that if you're pushing back against your country, against your government, that it means you don't love it. And I think we really need to, like, capture that as a false narrative. If you love America, you will fight for her to be what she's supposed to be, right? If you love America, you want everyone to benefit from her promises, right? You can't, like, love this country and hate half the people who live here, right? You can't, like, love this country and, like, poison the air, water, and soil and not care about anyone's health unless it's you, right? Like, that's not what love is. And somehow we've kind of, like, let people who have, like, that narrow, like you said, that very, like, narrow view, like, as long as I win and somebody else loses, I'm okay. We've kind of, like, let those folks, like, seize onto the idea of, like, patriotism and freedom, and, like, I think they're false versions of that. I don't think that's real. But we need to not, I think we need to not be afraid to talk about how, like, the queer community is for freedom. Duh. Oh my God, right? Like, who is a bigger freedom fighter than someone who's just trying to be their own person in a world that wants to crush them? Like, this is what resilience looks like. This festival that we're at right now. But we have to, like, right? Like, actually tell our story and not be afraid of it.
Yeah, reclaim the patriot.
That's right. Yep.
You know, because we are the patriot. We're the ones that want to see the country better.
This is what,
we
yeah.
are the ones. Like,
That's right.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm with you. What a great note to end on. Thanks for showing up for some facts. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. All right, so again, Steph V. Hill.